Yeah.
I guess it's 1 o'clock, folks. So good afternoon to everybody that's here. Welcome to our first commission meeting of 2023. So thank you all for being here. First off, we'd like to do the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. I'd also like to, if you would please, I'd like to take a moment of silence for our past member, Skeet from Remington, who passed away last night. Okay, thank you very much. We certainly miss having Mr. Ashby down at the end of the table. Also, we have new members joining us today. We have Mr. Tom Underwood, Fall River County Board of Supervisors, who's been with us before, so welcome back. There is, I understand, a new member from town of Orange.
I met with him about an hour ago. He was coming. But
He's okay. Well, when Mr. Kent gets here, we'll certainly welcome him. And also we have a guest joining us today. This is Ms. Yowick from town of Madison. To see what goes on around here. Welcome. Thank you very much. Okay. And of course, with incoming members, we also have outgoing members that we'd like to thank. Everybody, of course, knows Mayor Roby from Orange. She served with us for 8.5 years on the commission. So she's going to leave that to others now. And Mr. Gary Deal from Culpeper County, who was with us the past 2 years. It's not with us. So we certainly thank them for their contributions over these past years. With that, I'll get Mr. Monty to call the roll, please.
Yes, happy to. Mr. Butler, Mr. Catlin, Mayor Coiner, Mr. Crozier,
Here.
Mr. Curry,
Here.
Ms. Donahue,
Here.
Mr. Egerton,
Here.
Mr. Hidley, here, Mr. Jackson, Mayor Lamar, Mr. McCullough,
Here.
Mr. Pent, Mr. Simple, Mayor Sisson, Ms. Taylor,
Here.
Mr. Underwood,
Here.
Mr. Voorhees,
Present.
Mr. Weekly,
Here.
Mr. Woods.
Here.
Have a quorum.
Okay, cool. You've all looked at the agenda. Does anyone have any changes they need to make to the agenda? Anything? Late additions or anything? Okay.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Any members of the public who would like to address the commission today? Don't see anyone? Did you hear from anyone?
No comments before the meeting.
Okay, all righty. We'll move on then. We don't have any presentations, special recognitions today, but next up is the approval of the minutes. We have minutes from the December 14th meeting included in the packet for approval. We also have the executive committee minutes from February 1st. That's for information purposes only. Are there any changes to the December 14th minutes or comments? Not really a motion to approve those.
Move to approve.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I abstain because I wasn't here for it.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, move on then to money, the financial reports. Patrick, if you review the FY 2023 financials and the proposed budget amendments that you prepared.
Yep, and these are on the screen. If you don't have, there's a couple packets down there if anybody would like one. Otherwise, I'll run through them on the screen. FY 2023, the revenue expenditures through January, it's about 60% of the fiscal year. Revenues are about 70% of with the proposed amendments in mind, and expenses are about 57%, which is generally in tracking with how our finances run on an annual basis. Operating expenses are in line with the budget as it was proposed, and with a few amendments that are proposed as well. And then project expenses are where we have the lower amount at this point, but that's again pretty typical for a typical fiscal year for us. We've got a series of proposed budget amendments for your consideration. I'm happy to run through them, kind of line by line, but in general, a lot of these are revenues that we've either already accrued based on approved grant agreements or approved, again, grant agreements with that the commission has already seen. The exceptions would be and some of these are revenues that we've already received rather than are just intending or anticipating to receive before June 30. The SEDS amount 15,000 is what we anticipate to receive. We don't have that in hand yet, but the grant agreement is obviously in place. The 2,700 for the town of Washington pass-through money came in last week, consistent with the previous expenses we've run through from the commission for the town. And then the one addition is the proposed budget or the adopted budget in June of 2022. We had based interest on what interest rates have been for quite a while. We've seen a significant increase there, so we're proposing an addition of about $13,000 in interest, primarily from the Virginia Investment Pool account that the commission has. We do have reductions, and these reductions are all from projects where the spending is going to happen in a future fiscal year. A lot of times we're basing that on our expectations or anticipated, the way projects are going to advance. And in these cases, these are projects where they're going to be just pushed into FY 2024. The National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant is the largest reduction for this year. Again, 250,000, which was in the adopted budget, down to 75,000, and that's related to construction costs. Again, that will be pushed forward. We have an extension that's already been approved from NIFWIC for those funds as well. And then the other one that would be the other two that I would note, one is we had 50,000 in the budget for hazard mitigation plan, but we're still awaiting VDM and FEMA's award of that contract. And so we'll zero that line item out for this year. And based on spending on the PDC housing development program from our grant partners, reducing that from 500,000 to 300,000 for this fiscal year. Again, the expenses and revenues that will come in a future fiscal year. And on the expense side, really in keeping with those projects that I just mentioned, corresponding reductions in those, the PDC Housing Development Program, the Hazard Mitigation Program, the National Fish and Wildlife Grant. We're also proposing to reduce the office maintenance line item from 14,000 to 6,000, and that's really based on spending that's going to, I think, carry forward. That's a typical amount for us. Sometimes we'll include additional funds there for one-time expenses, such as when we did the renovation of the conference room space. And also, I think we're anticipating roof replacement on the building, which is 25 years old. My proposal in the future would be to have those as coming out of reserves rather than as part of the annual budget, as it would be one-time costs, but I'm looking to commission's input there.
What are you thinking of the reserve amount, or do you currently have a CapEx reserve amount?
We don't have a set amount, and some of that will come up in the next agenda item. Okay. We had initially, about 5 years ago, the commission had made the decision to build up to cover costs of the note on the building, as well as giving us some flexibility should any grants anticipate. I think that's honestly something that taking commission's input on. If we feel like we're at a good point, then how do we start to spend some of that, or how do we hold that? There was the discussion in December from at the commission meeting of is the office space that we have now suitable for size of staff and things of that nature. Internally, we're still kind of going through that to figure out, do we need more space? And I think, as we mentioned, then the building next door, or the attached building next door is for sale. So, having some of those discussions and having some of that guidance from the commission would be appreciated. But there's not a set number per se. And then the only other things I would want to bring to attention is moving in the addition of 20,000 to payroll expenses, and that's reflecting full staffing as of December. Those will be covered with grants that we have, but that will cover us through the end of the fiscal year without change, and that really comes in from some of the grants that were awarded and accepted in between the beginning of the fiscal year and now. So what that ultimately does is reduces our budget down to 1 million, just over 1.7 million from the adopted budget of just over 2 million, or just short of 2.1 million. So I'm happy to answer questions on either the spending or any of the amendments if you have them.
Anyone have any questions, comments? Before we move on, Mr. Pent, welcome. We are,
Sorry, I was late.
that's quite all right. Quite all right, glad to have you here. We're on item
you.
number 8 on the agenda, talking about the financial reports. Just
Patrick, just a quick question. The reduction from 500,000 to 300,000 for revenue for the PDC Housing Development Program. And then the reduction from 445 to 245 for expenditures. Why are they not aligned?
They are, well, so where that goes is the revenues that exceed the expenses, the 55,000 is money we've set aside for our staff time that we're using to administer the grant. And stuff.
So that's in this different.
So that
category.
that's staying the same. It's really our pass through to partners just based on their spending and their project activities is where the reduction comes.
I'd like to move to adopt.
Second.
there's a motion to adopt the amended budget and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, terrific. Next, we move to the semi-annual financial account summary.
Yep, if you remember, these are provided in August and February or anytime any of you desires the information, but this is just a summary of our checking money market and then our 2 Virginia investment pool funds that we use through the VIP account. That those 2, the NAV liquid fund and the long-term bond fund, that's generally what we thought of as where we have our reserves kept. And if we have any ability to move money from money market into those during the year, we typically do that. So if you look at the calendar year, I mean, this is pretty typical. We tend to, on the operating account, try to keep it at a certain amount so that we can manage any sort of reimbursements that are going to come in through grants, so that we've got the money to cover. You'll see September is where we see a spike, and that's September, October. That's largely due to Path Foundation, the funding for our regional transportation collaborative work, where they pay full year. They put this year was 210,000 there. So what we did this year, and it dropped down in November, Terry Sneed and myself made the decision based on our forecasting of how expenses would run, that we could move in November 150,000 from the money market account into the long-term to the NAV account, really just to draw additional interest, but because we felt like we could cover that amount, the operating expenses through the rest of the fiscal year with the amounts there in November. It also would give us an opportunity if we determined we've only ever put money from money market into the VIP account. So that would give us an opportunity if we desire to figure out how fast does it come back in if we need it. But that was not something that we've had to do yet and don't anticipate having to do until we spend more of that in the regional transportation collaborative money. So you can see the reserve account through the year again, really, stayed, in actually lost money mostly because of the long-term bond fund losing money throughout most of the year. And then that spike in November. We did start to see the bond fund return, positive investments towards the end of the year, but it's been down year over year, which is why we've kept most of our funds in the liquidity fund, which has had a positive interest rate, as I mentioned.
It's now down materially year to date with the move this week. So with the 10-year getting up to 3.93, it's back beyond where it was then. So unfortunately not going the right direction. Would it make sense? I mean, with yield inversion and with probably your money market being at about 4.25 right now, historically you'd put money in the long-term bond fund, but would it make sense to put your money in the money market account? Because that may be the highest yielding account of everything you have.
Terry and I've had that discussion. Would it make sense? Because that bond fund had 100,000 put into it initially when we first opened the account. It just sat there. And I'd be certainly more than willing to move completely out of there or leave some in if that was the commission's direction, for sure.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive that short term is better than long term, right?
Yes.
Thus the inversion, but I've got everything in money market, even some savings, which were no-nos. I mean, it was all, stocks. Crazy world right now. I want to go on that short term stuff.
And I think we monitor the account, for me monthly, Terry a little bit more often, but I think that's something that we can kind of keep an eye on if we feel like there's an opportune time to move back in. But, we feel like the NAV liquidity fund has been, has shown a payoff consistently. And it's been, certainly, as I said, it's generated a lot of interest, more than we anticipated this year.
What's the current yield on the NAV?
I think for the last month, it's in I think it's close to what you said, the 4.25%.
Okay, great.
It kind of, they do it in and out every, based on the month, but I think the
It's
long-term
actually-
bond over the years,
It's actually at about 4.7. right now.
4.7.
Yeah, 'cause the Fed raised
Thanks, Gary.
Great. That and money market are good places to have money, in my opinion. I agree.
And for some of you that are newer, and when we first opened the VIP account in 2017, it was really because our money market account with Atlantic Union, or Second Bank and Trust at the time, had a very low rate at the time. And so the VIP fund was, okay, this is going to generate more, and it has certainly on the NAV fund has done well. So this just gives you, for each of those accounts, the month to month for the year. Again, the bond fund flat, the shift of the money into the NAV fund showing in November, and then our checking account, which again, we kind of manage on a day-to-day, really just for operational expenses. And then the overall values, again, showing actually, I'll kind of scroll ahead to the 10-year balance, but this shows just sort of the process here of putting into place an idea. We want to have a reserve, or we want to have some funds available in case of, as I mentioned in the memo, again, paying down the long-term debt on the building, but also having that cushion there in case of a grant that wouldn't come back, or any other need to, not immediately have to make a decision on staffing or anything like that, because there's some flexibility there.
What's the debt rate on the building?
We owe Terry is 245,000, I think. Is it that, or is it 140? Sorry, 145.
Yeah. I was gonna
What's
say, I thought it
what's
was-
the interest rate?
Interest rate is 4.75.
Well, if we're earning as much as we're paying in interest, why pay down, especially if the Fed's going to continue to raise rates? So keep the money, earn more interest than that you're net making money.
And that's been, I think, staff's approach has been to leave it be. So I'm happy to answer questions on any of the finances, either through the calendar year or, sort of that 10-year history as well.
Anyone else have any thoughts or any direction you'd like them to pursue, or bring something back next month with some?
I don't know if we need a motion, but moving from the long-term bond fund into the VIP NAV and not even having maybe keep the account open, but not have the money in it, makes near-term financial sense.
And we can check and verify if it has to have a minimum amount to keep it open, or
If it doesn't, close it and we reopen anytime. Yeah.
We need to have a motion for that, or?
I don't feel you do, but if that,
I mean,
I
Well,
think the direction is pretty clear.
yeah.
assuming that's the motion, I'll second it.
I
Okay,
think
great.
staff's, but if we do that, then it would send a signal to staff that they're not empowered to.
And
move
that's
that
why I
money
didn't
around.
make it a
So
motion.
I'd
That's
rather
why I prefaced
they
mine
be
with if we do,
Yeah.
I do, you mentioned staff looking at the building space needs. Do you have timeline on that?
Admittedly, I think my internal timeline has been, by the end of the fiscal year, to have a sense of, do we feel like we need more space? If we do, and part of that is driven by, again, the building next door, which had the same sign out for a year.
Okay.
It last turned over about a year and a half ago. The people that purchased it intended to move in and then never did, and so now they've had the sign out there. It's listed for 300,000, which gives me some pause. But I think being able to go in and potentially see what they'd be willing to do would be of interest. I don't get the sense that it's there's been a lot of actual units in this office park for sale at times, and nothing has moved super quick.
And it's not an emergency for us
Right
now, but okay.
Well, we can revisit this, I guess, again next time, but if you want to take into account some of what we've discussed here, some of these ideas, and see what makes sense. With that. Everybody good with that? Okay. If there's no further questions on that, I guess we can move on then to the director's report.
Yeah, just a couple of highlights from me in addition to the written report. The first item is I do want, as I met with Councilmember Penn yesterday and appreciate his time. And as part of that, shared with him a new commissioner's handbook, and that gave me reason to remind myself that many of you probably received a handbook when you, certainly if you, since I became director, received a handbook when I first met with you, probably have never received an update to that handbook. And, you know, at this point with items being easier to just access online, there is a link on our website to the updated handbook. I'll share that in an email afterwards, which has, you know, generally the basic same information, but just items that have been updated. And that's really especially related to organizational policies that apply to, you know, the board itself, and then all the other information as well. So that will be accessible to you. If any of you would prefer a paper copy, then I'm happy to print that out and provide that to you. But this will be something that moving in the future will continue to keep updated as needed and as policies change and the other information changes as well.
So Patrick, if we were here before you became directors, are you saying we're old?
No, because with the exception of Mayor Pointer, everybody was here when I first started working here, or nobody was here with the exception of Mayor Pointer. when I first
So it
started
just
working,
means
so.
I'm old.
Oh, I just wanted to make sure we
To
got that in
clarify.
there, Bob.
And then, you know, not to go too far afield on the report, but even talking with Chair Taylor before the meeting, you know, Mayor Pointer's been here since 2005, Mr. Woods 2010, Mr. McCullough 2011, and then yourself, Mr. Crozier, from 2014. And so there has been, you know, turnover, and even some of the conversation before the meeting about county boards of supervisors and town councils and just new members. And I think that's been held true here as well. So, so again, I'll send that link out and happy to provide a paper copy if anybody would prefer that. I did want to share our Foothills Housing Network staff and a lot of service provider partners. They did conduct the annual point in time count January 25th, and that was throughout the region. You know, and so as it says in the notes here, anticipate the number of homeless individuals and households will increase. Really, where, as I mentioned here, anecdotally, what we saw was not nearly as many, you know, in hotels. You know, unsheltered numbers somewhat similar, but I think where we have seen an increase, and certainly in the calls to coordinate entry, is with individuals living in their cars, unfortunately. So, and that was something that was seen and you know, sort of made contact during the point in time count across the region. So we have seen that increase, unfortunately. Preliminary numbers are somewhat down from last year. So we had 280 in our counts last year. The preliminary numbers that we have are 243. Those are not verified through all the surveys, but that was sort of the preliminary count we have. And again, I think probably by March, we'll have more information, more data that can be shared on a county by county level as far as the point in time count goes. But again, I want to thank, you know, certainly Rebecca, Dee, Matt Tobias, our Mayor Core Vista, and we had really good partnership with the social services departments as well as other service providers, and one specifically in Orange between the Department of Social Services and Good Samaritan, which is a nonprofit kind of right across the street. And so they actually had a dinner where they had individuals coming in and were able to connect with you know, those individuals from the community. And I think for a lot of the people that were involved there were somewhat surprised and had their eyes opened in terms of just the need that was there. So appreciate their partnership as well as every other social services department that assisted. One thing that we're beginning to develop and may be beneficial to any of you, excuse me, is our rural transportation work program for July 1 to June 30 of next year. This is our VDOT funding that's been consistent over the last 20 years or so. Really for us, we use that to provide staff support for updating regional plans, but for you locally, if there's local transportation projects, local transportation planning that it would be beneficial to have our staff either coordinate or just participate in, that's an opportunity there. I've had conversations with some of you about, you know, some items of particular interest that we can definitely include, but that we can also begin working on prior to that. But that's, if there are specific needs, then please feel free to reach out to me or to our other staff. We will engage, you know, other staff members in planning and zoning on that as well as we develop that work program. And then the last item is just, we did receive word in January that our the Community Flood Preparedness Fund application was approved. That's through Department of Conservation and Recreation. We're going to use those funds to support a regional flood resiliency plan and strategies as part of our hazard mitigation plan update that will occur once we get FEMA and VDEM to officially award us. I'm hoping in the next month or two, which I feel like I say every meeting. It's been a struggle to get that pushed up through, but the resiliency funding will really allow us to bring in some additional strategies related to flood resiliency. So we'll be happy to receive that.
Is that a match at all?
It's a 80-20. So we received for the hazard mitigation request was a $100,000 request to do the plan update to support some of our staff and some consultant work. This was leveraging $37,000 state money with $12,500 match, which all things working out the way they should, if we manage it correctly, will actually come from the hazard mitigation federal grant itself. So we're trying to minimize our outlay of local funds, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to answer questions on that. Anything else that included in the report or otherwise?
Anyone have any questions on the director's report? Terrific, thank you. Okay, next we'll move on to staff updates and old business. First is the update on the PDC Housing Development Program, and I don't see Jennifer, but I guess you are going to update us
This
on
is
that.
I apologize. This is a Patrick talking meeting today. Really, Chair Taylor and I talked about under old business, just kind of leaving some of these items on the agenda. There's not too much of an update other than to share that for the commission's approval in December, we did communicate with Rappahannock-Rapidan Community Services, indicating that we had to unallocate their award just based on their timeline for their project in Orange. As expected, they were disappointed, but understanding. And again, if we have funding in the future, we anticipate trying to partner with them again if they have a project that can move forward. We're also waiting on the Fauquier Habitat project, which was also discussed in December, waiting for, as I understand it, the town of Warrenton has indicated potential interest in allocating some of their ARPA money towards the project. For us, we're sort of waiting on that to happen before we feel comfortable that the project can move forward completely with our funding. So again, we've got that money allocated to the project, but we don't have an agreement yet with Fauquier Habitat. The other 4 projects that we do have agreements with continue to advance. One of which, the People Incorporated project here in the town of Culpeper. People Incorporated staff was in front of the Board of Supervisors and I think town council maybe as well. And when we saw their request to seek another round of low-income housing tax credit funding, we immediately reached out to say, this isn't changing your timeline. They assured us that it did not, because their first award has a spending deadline, which still fits with ours. So they just, again, with costs rising and things of that nature, need that additional funding. So we continue to get their reports and pass that back. But at this point, the project in Madison is our main one that's advanced through purchase and then into renovations at the project there in Madison. And then the last project, the adaptive reuse of Ben and Mary's in Fauquier County. We expect to see some movement there coming up in this quarter, frankly, before the end of March. So our partners that we have agreements with are moving along as we would expect. The one that we're still kind of waiting on, we're just waiting on an update from the town of Warrenton.
It's great to see these things moving along. Anybody have any questions, issues, comments? Okay. Next, then we have an update on the SEDS process.
Yeah, so the SEDS, we had our kickoff meeting. As you recall from December, we awarded contract to Camoin Associates at our kickoff meeting last Tuesday. Hybrid meeting with some in this room and then several participating across the region. All of the counties, several of our towns, and that included economic development staff, it included planning and zoning staff, some town managers, others from other departments, chambers of commerce. We've got private sector participants as well. The main thing is this was a pretty dry kickoff meeting, really, given the background. The most interesting part of it, I thought, was having a interactive session for about 20 minutes towards the end of the meeting, where we really just had the participants going through talking about what are the assets that the region has that we can capitalize on, some of the basic kind of introductory things. and then talking about potential challenges and some of the opportunities. A couple of things I would just mention from that, and these were all anonymous amongst the participants, but there's a lot of information on opportunity to formalize economic development partnerships between counties and towns where they don't already exist. I think through our office, we've had good success with the tourism partnership that we've got. I think people looking for potential opportunities for economic development partnerships. A lot of times we've got several counties that are members of Central Virginia Partnership. We've got Rappahannock and Fauquier, which are either unaffiliated or have loose partnerships with Northern Virginia. So looking at those opportunities there, I think was one of the things brought up. And really just considering economies of scale for marketing. Every county and a lot of the towns have marketing opportunities, but are there opportunities to collaborate for just better economies of scale, like I said. But also a recognition that what's going to work in some counties and some towns is not going to work everywhere. And so needing to be sensitive to that approach, which I think we consistently are, or at least try to be from this office. So again, this is going to be a 15-month process. We will continue to include the board on those. Any of you that want to participate, I'm happy to have you there or involved. And certainly once we get to the interview and focus group stage, I think that will be an opportunity and would like to include as many of you as possible in that part of it as well. So again, happy to have it kicked off. And I think I made the comment during the meeting that I've worked here for 17 years. And I think we've been talking about doing this for about 15 of those years. So it's nice to finally start something. So yeah, we're happy to see that process go forward.
Questions, comments? Okay. All righty. Well, as you all know, this commission, believe it or not, is 50 years old. So do we have any updates on how we're going to acknowledge the 50th anniversary?
We're still working on annual meeting. Two updates that I can say. My thanks to Eldon James, our regional legislative liaison. He, with my input, had a resolution go into the General Assembly carried by all the members of the region's delegation, just 50th anniversary resolution commemorating the commission's 50th anniversary. So appreciate that getting carried through and passed. For you all, what you'll likely see in the next couple months from me is a request locally for resolutions. And I think, I'm happy to kind of run that on whatever timeline works best for you all in terms of, outside of budget season, things like that. We don't really have a specific month that would make sense, although I suppose I could look up, it's regional collaboration month, because I'm sure there is one that's designated that. But yeah, would have something that would run through each of the counties and towns coming up. And then I would hope by April, we'll have a better sense of annual meeting location, likely to be in Culpeper, and sort of start to market that earlier than we normally do, just because it is the 50th anniversary.
All righty. So back at the December meeting, commissioners asked for an opportunity to track what's going on with broadband projects in the region, and some of you had some comments. Does anybody have any comments, updates, what's going on in your region as far as broadband goes, to enlighten those with questions?
I think in Culpeper, we're going to receive a construction schedule on March 15th relative to All Points Broadband Initiative. So that is for the homes that are the 4,380 homes that are identified as not being served by Comcast, that will be served by the fiber to the home networks. And the goal is to have it completed by the end of February of next year. But the construction schedule is supposed to get to us on March 15th.
Anyone else? What's going on?
We need them to finish their work in Culpeper. So we can move around.
I was gonna say, I think it was Rappahannock that had the concerns with.
Well, they're part of have they shared with you the basic shape of the networks and where they're going? The Culpeper, maybe John, just us sending the map that we got from them back months ago of where the lines would go. Because I know the old Dominion 35 megawatt line is part of it for where they're carrying stuff. And I believe that goes into Rappahannock.
We know the REC backbone
Right.
location.
But then they even did, like, for the REC backbone, which components were going to have fiber on it, kind of.
Yeah. Anything you've got that you think is pertinent to us, I'd love to see it.
I'll see what we got. Problem there.
I think the last meeting, Gary had mentioned the poles replacement were taking longer than expected. Did-
Same.
Your Gary said that.
Yes,
Oh, right.
yeah, sorry, not back here. Is that still ongoing, or do you have any update?
Yeah, I mean, that's been their reason for not having a construction schedule sooner. And what they've said is they want to fix more poles before they bother starting construction, because they don't want to fix a small amount of poles, send a crew out, and then the crew's finished and there's no more poles ready for them, so they go to another county.
Right.
So they're trying to get as many poles ready as possible before they start the construction. But
So we've heard
that's
their
frustrating
messaging
for our
too.
citizens who want to see construction.
Well, I'm anxious to see what they provide you on the 15th. And
So are we.
we're a couple years behind, or a year and a half behind you on end of project. So we'll be looking at you to see what we should be seeing in the future. Imagine Fauquier in part of their county is doing.
We're a little bit behind too. We were getting some sort of a discussion about the fact that all points needed some approvals from the State Corporation Commission,
For Dominion.
but that was being held up because the governor and the legislator were fighting over who to appoint to the State Corporation Commission, and so the State Corporation Commission doesn't have a quorum.
Yep.
And so we're in this sort of loop now, and so we started to begin to put pressure on our General Assembly representatives and the governor to get this thing resolved so we can move this project on.
If you drag a little bit, then we're all REC, so we can get ours underway after they're done.
Right.
It's all right, Dominion seems to drag very well by itself. I'm sure you'll be done long before we are.
Jonathan, you seen Firefly actually active?
I'm sure they're active, but when I click on their queue about once a week, it just says make ready. And there's a lot of parts of our county that are to be determined. A little frustrating, but I understand that they have to have the polls ready before they can go. Like John just said, we don't want to start a section and have to stop. We're trying to secure a fiber hut for them on county property, so hopefully that's an incentive to get things rolling, but still a lot of make ready work being done. Waiting on batty announcements as well, as I'm sure many of you. DHCD actually is still, wrestling is the right term. I think they've been very generous to, was CenturyLink, then Lumens, I guess they're Brightspeed now. They're still trying to work out an MOU for kind of our portion of the county that heads towards Greene County. That's been ongoing for over a year.
That was an RDOF area.
And while this negotiation continues for a year and everybody has to meet the August 2025 deadline, it's a little frustrating, but we still have portions of our county that are waiting to be determined who the provider would be. So Firefly is our bright spot. It's just to make ready, but we have other RDOF areas that we're trying to figure out.
A mess. I guess I just take for granted being in town. It's been so easy for us, but these people in the county, it's really difficult.
I'm sure Orange has got everybody connected.
We're up over 3,700 customers and just dealing with Lake of the Woods on easements in there. That's our only holdup in the lake, which is another potential 4,200. So we're still, and believe it or not, we're still fighting with a little bit of the RDOF, and Patty has obviously not been beneficial for us, but you know, you still do what you can do. So the one thing we are very fortunate in, as far as materials go, we stockpiled. We absolutely stockpiled before and during COVID, before the supply chain got really nailed. So we're good on that, and we're good on the installation crews. Our biggest thing is easements in Lake of the Woods and VDOT easements, because it's amazing how you change 2 staff members in a residency And you go from what became efficient when Alan Saunders went to Louisa, who in my opinion is the best VDOT employee I've seen in years,
Agree.
to total crap at this point. That's a nice way to put it.
We can relate.
Yeah, yeah. So at any rate, yeah, we're still moving along and, just all the normal stuff of doing business.
One thing outside of the county efforts that we've seen in Culpeper is Verizon in particular has expanded their fiber network quite a bit. So as our construction schedule gets closer, all of a sudden Comcast and Verizon appear in a lot of areas and start putting fiber in.
That's good.
So,
Good side benefit.
Yeah, we've been hearing a lot from Comcast about that too.
Of course, you asked them to partner.
They had their shot.
I will say, in follow-up to that, I talked with Mr. Curry and Stonahay especially about, what their interests were. One of the things that, we did internally was pull, especially for All Points, just because they covered 3 of the counties here. Anywhere else they're doing a project to see if there's information, and they have been, Northern Neck, they had gone in last year, and that, I think is because they're so far ahead, it's much easier for them to track. The only one that of their other counties, Hanover has a nice webpage that I think the county, probably because they have staff capacity to do it, sort of has an updated monthly report of here's all the, activity, here's things like that. Mr. Weekly, I'm interested because of Firefly, that looking at that, I was like, well, that's nice because you've got this map and a nice thing you click on, but if it doesn't update, then it's not really that useful. It looks nice. And I was like, well, if All Points, even if All Points put something out like that, that'd be something. But again, if it doesn't update, then you quickly grow tired of looking at it. So
for the VATI process, they have to provide monthly updates, don't they, John?
Yeah.
So, yeah, because of that, we ought to.
They're limited in scope.
Yes,
Right.
well, ours are so limited, they say nothing, but yes.
and the Batty, I mean, it's interesting to me because I think at least a month ago, speaking with the HCD staff that would know, indicated that, they're basically at the end, ready to announce, and the fact that it's dragging out, although that's been the case with a couple of grant programs for the HCD. So I don't know if it's an administrative holdup, outside of the department or not, but.
Sounds like it.
Appreciate the dialogue.
Yes, thank you.
And the other thing I would say is Chair Taylor and I talked, and I think just kind of leaving this as an agenda item, whether there's updates or not, was sort of the preferred method of moving forward. So.
Okay, terrific. Well, thank you, everyone. Under new business, we have just a couple of items. One is kind of a pass-through sort of. Items 11A and 11B are grant applications that were approved by the executive committee at the meeting earlier this month in order to meet application deadlines for the grants. So the commission's practice is to ratify such actions made by the executive committee. So if you've had a chance to look at them, are there any questions for staff on the applications? And these are to the Department of Rail and Public Transportation for Section 5310 Mobility Management and the Technical Assistance Grants. Does anybody have any? Like I said, we went through executive committee with these, but.
I would so move.
Second.
Okay, a motion and a second to ratify the actions of the executive committee. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next up is item 11C. This is a grant request to the Virginia Tourism Corporation Marketing Leverage Program. Patrick will review that one for us, please.
Yeah, just briefly, as I mentioned in the SEDS update, we've had a good partnership with the tourism directors at localities or, and in some cases, visitor center partners that have worked together cooperatively for, honestly, for several years. They came together earlier this month, I think maybe 2 weeks ago today, kind of just talking about general updates, a chance sort of like you all to engage in roundtable what's happening locally, what sort of opportunities they're looking for. And one of the things that they talked about was wanting to put a request into the Virginia Tourism Corporation Marketing Leverage Program grant, which is one that the commission has applied for before for similar initiatives. And their goal is really to, post-COVID, do a relaunch of, two of our regional programs, the Twin Rivers Trail and then also the Virginia Piedmont. The Virginia Piedmont is basically a site that has good visitation and pushes people back out to your local tourism websites. The Twin Rivers Trail is a program that is designed for agriculture or agri-artisan sites. And so that is something that is free for anyone to be listed on, provided they meet the criteria of having some sort of agricultural focus or using produce or products produced in the region, if they're a food business or otherwise. So the goal would be here would really be to make that request, $10,000 request to BTC, would be matched with the pooled money that the tourism departments provide for regional marketing, which totals $7,000 a year. So using balance of this year's fund and a little bit of next year's to match that, and would just be to do a kind of a refresh and advertising campaign for those initiatives. So application is due on next Tuesday, I think, which is, it's timely for us to put this together and put it in front of you.
I move to approve that application.
Second.
Okay, motion, any second, any further discussion? Sounds terrific. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Terrific. So we'll move on with that. Thank you very much. Next up then, we have the nominating committee. Essentially, executive committee serves as the nominating committee to bring forth the slate of new officers for this year. So the executive committee put forth nomination for suggestions for chair is Mr. Fred Catlin, vice chair, Mr. Coiner, treasurer, Mr. Eggertson. And then we have 3 at-large members. The past chair would be myself, Paul McCullough, and Mr. Ted Voorhees. And I need to know if there are any nominations from the floor.
Move nominations be closed.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay. Then we will need a motion from the executive committee, I assume.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Anybody need me to repeat those? We all good? Okay. All those in favor of the new slate of officers, or do we need to do a voice roll call vote? I never remember these things.
I mean, traditionally we've done voice vote, but I'm happy to
Okay,
do roll
that's
call.
fine.
I feel like it's gonna be this.
Yes, we have nobody
Yeah,
else. Let's do
I
it.
don't think there's any, nobody has any objections. I notice. Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We do not have any closed session items, so congratulations, by the way, to all those new officers. Next, we'll move on to the regional roundtable. I guess we'll start with Mr. Hively. Tell us what's going on in the town of Colfax.
Sure, we have several construction projects going on. Our digester centrifuge project is moving forward kind of slowly, waiting on a lot of materials. We did finally get a centrifuge in. I think it's the most worldly traveled centrifuge I've ever seen. I think it went all the way to China before it ended up here for some reason. But anyhow, we got a centrifuge now.
Did it arrive on a balloon?
Maybe that was it. Yeah.
Probably got shot down.
From the amount of time it took us to get it, that's probably the mode of travel. So that project's going well. Our 522 project is ongoing now, so that's causing a little bit of disruption in that end of town. We'll continue probably for another year or so on that project. Our Heritage Park and parking lot project, a lot of earthwork going on that project. We're shooting to have that done in March. We have to have it done in March, don't we? Because the main construction person is going to retire. So he was actually going to retire at the end of this month, and he said he needed another month. So we granted him that to do that. We did get our bids on the pedestrian bridge that's associated with that project, not as low as we hoped, not as high as we feared, but $3.6 million. So it is what it is. It's, speaking of the choir, anybody that's had bids out there. And we have been tentatively awarded 3 smart scale projects. The Orange Roundabout project, Orange Road Roundabout project. A sidewalk project from Orange Road up to Standpipe Road, and then a Old Brandy Road sidewalk project, about $29.7 million of that.
Where's the roundabout located on Orange Road? Where's that location?
15.3.
And 3, okay.
Mhm. So that has to be, go to the CTB in June to be approved, but I find it amazing that they come up with that amount of money for small localities. I guess.
I've got a discussion on that later.
Yeah. And let's see, we just locked up $3.9 million in a lockbox to say that we're debt free, but since we can make more money
Right.
than what we're getting, we're not paying that off. But that's the first note. We have another note that comes due in 27. So we plan on doing the same thing. It'll take us longer on the enterprise fund to do that. So kind of things that came to my mind.
What's going
No
on?
deferrals.
Okay, well, then I personally created a list. So. Patrick mentioned the project in Orange that we weren't able to or we clawed the money back on. That's the old Sheltering Arms homeless facility, and it is moving forward through Virginia Housing Tax Credits, and so that is making progress. Looks like a 3-story apartment building type configuration. So we're kind of happy with a nice improvement to that space, and then that'll leave some future space for enhanced services in our community. So that's promising. The board's biggest capital project initiatives relate to our parks and our existing buildings. So in the parks realm, we've got various designs going for different parks across the community. It's a good time for parks in Orange, as the town of Gordonsville's got their nice parks project going with a swimming pool, and we're building a disc golf course and designing walking trails in the southwest. Looking at something along the lines of what Culpepper's done with the gymnasium type facility, which that'll be a little longer time horizon to get designed, and we'll need to do some financing on that. But it looks like we've got access to available CIP pay-as-you-go dollars to handle the other sort of smaller projects. Talking to Town of Orange a little bit about a skate park partnership. Also talking to the Wilderness Crossing rezoning applicant about a Crawford Park facility there. So we have different parks in different places at different levels. So that'll be interesting to watch over the next year or two. Buildings, we're playing a little bit of musical chairs, moving folks around and kind of right sizing some space and upgrading. This is one of those cases of be careful, when you build a nice building for part of the organization, then everybody says, "Oh, I want one." So we got some upgrading to do in our older spaces, and the board's approved a framework for how to do that. We think we're also in pretty good shape with funding for that, with what's been left over in funding for our radio upgrades and our public safety building. We got word from the FAA that they're going to help us with a hangar construction project, which is something that we sorely need. We had a long waiting list there, and that was something we didn't think we could do, but it looks like we are going to be able to pull that off.
Ted, what percentage is that? Do you recall what FAA does?
I don't recall,
Mhm.
but we can get you that. On smart scale, we do have an orange roundabout, but our orange roundabout is at 522, and that's funded. That we actually got that word last year, so we're hoping to see them get going forward right away. The new smart scale funded that waits for the CTB approval is at Route 20 and Route 3. It's continuous green tea. So if you're thirsty, apparently you can go there and get some tea. I don't know much about it. No
Very good
laughs, no.
description.
It's like was $16 million turn lane. I don't know. It's
That's exactly what it
something.
is. It's one of 6 parts for an ultimate completion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see the backup going that direction. Really, the problem is turning onto 20 from 3
Yep.
westbound, but whatever. Wilderness crossing rezoning has been exciting. With some very aggressive opposition through some of our regional nonprofits, I think we finally got a planning commission public hearing in March, and we'll see if we can accommodate the crowd that is anticipated, and I guess the board will be looking at that in April perhaps. So that's our biggest long-term impact in our community, and it's big. So, and the last thing, just water supply plan, which relates to this question, and we've gotten some inquiries about where we are on that. Ours was last approved, I think we finished it in 2010, but it was accepted by DEQ in 2013. And of course, I think we've all gotten those notices that we don't have to do an update until they give us guidance for a regional plan. And I haven't heard anything more. I don't know if anybody else has. So we're just waiting for them to do their rulemaking on, I guess, how the regions are divided, or how to decide who's in which region. So.
I mean, the last map that came out as part of the rulemaking was coincident with Planning District 9 with us, but I think that could change. But as far as the process or begin your update, there's been nothing that we've seen.
And it's a 1.5 to 2-year type process, so I don't see how we'll have anything done before this rezoning that relates to it. So, yep. All good in Orange, and we got lots of people on the internet, so you guys got to get that. It's really gonna be good. This new thing, yeah.
And we do have weekly updates on that as well.
Kevin, you want to update us on what's
No,
going on
I
in Washington?
apologize. I was having difficulty getting away from all the little 3-year-olds in my classroom today. So I apologize for being here, and I apologize for bringing my friend with me, but
I'm going to need a name for the minutes.
and nutmeg.
Thanks, beautiful.
But she's a classroom dog, so she came with me. She's a Sheltie. We're having we have new administration in town of Washington. Joe Whitehead is the new mayor, and very excited with some of the things that he's doing initiative out to businesses to try to support them more, and we hope that will go forward. We'll be talking to VDOT this spring at grant. So Patrick, I'll probably talk with you a little bit about that. And outside of that, just dealing with yo-yo weather.
For Rappahannock, I'm so glad we don't have all of the projects going that you guys do. In fact, we have so few, it's wonderful. The big challenge for us right now, as far as I'm concerned, is growing up and maturing and needing more paid help on the fire and rescue side of things, and how to do that with the need for keeping our volunteers, because Rappahannock can't afford to go all paid ever. So really trying to, if anybody's got words of wisdom on how to help the two work together better, all ears on that. And then we have one park in Rappahannock, although I believe we are a park. So, but our park has its annual largest fundraiser, which is the fodder stack race. Anybody that likes to run, and that is April 15th, and 100% of the proceeds of that goes to our park. And we've got hopefully some nice projects coming up.
It's a 10K and it's not flat.
No, gotta lay hills. It's actually an ambulance at the top of one of our just in case. Your
You're
turn.
trying to attract people to come.
Yeah, I'll expand a little bit on the fire and rescue side, to say that the board took an unusual step and the authority they believe they have under Code Virginia, Title 27, Section 2713, and put in place new officers of one of our volunteer fire companies, and that's not been received well. And
We
then
had
we
a
have a
version of
lawsuit.
that a few years ago.
Yeah, well, we've seen those newspaper clippings.
Yeah.
So we're working with our insurance assigned counsel to work on a defense strategy for the soon lawsuit to that. We talked regionally about CSB and opioid funding, and I'm wondering where everybody is independently on opioid projects. If you've heard anything more from Jim McGrath on a regional project with CSB, which we think we can apply for separately with different money. I think we need to drive those discussions further with Jim, see where we're going with that, and we're not sure what to do with our local money at this point. Particularly if we can get different money for the regional CSB project.
Well, for Culpeper, we're attributing some of the local money to a position in our drug court effort, which is necessary to match about $500,000 of federal funds there that will operate our drug court for the next 4 years. So local money is being spent, but there's, from my understanding, plenty of money at the state for regional efforts. Like you, I'm waiting for Mr. McGrath to lead that charge. I don't wish to carry the ball, but if he's willing to put together all the information and the grant, then one of us will have to submit the grant. But I think that that concept's been introduced to my board, and I think they'll support it if and when it's in shape to move forward.
Excellent.
Maybe it's time to put together a Zoom meeting with Mr. McGrath and the county administrators to talk about that.
I know he's anxious to
My
do it.
my last conversation with Jim is just kind of waiting county's interest. So I do think he's the driver and has resources to put together that program. That was, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks ago, sensing what counties or localities want to do.
I vote for Culpeper to put that together.
Do you need a second?
Yeah. Other than that, I mentioned before, we are capital looking at courthouses and very early on in that, and trying to get some renovations, refurbishment to our historic buildings. So that's occupying our capital thoughts now. We're thankful that our schools are pretty good shape and we don't grow, so we don't need expanded schools. We just need to make sure the ones we have stay in good shape. So we're occupied on those things.
Very good. I can't believe Ted let the signs go past him without mentioning it. We have new county gateway signs being constructed and installed, which very nice looking. They're on stone pillars and wood thoroughfare already in place. Pretty much all of them. 3 and 20, 5, 22, 33. I think pretty much any of the main thoroughfares. They're very attractive. This has been an 8-year project. We authorized it years ago and it's getting done. But also out at what I will call the airport complex, which is where our public safety building and Booster Park are at. We have a new monument sign out there that also advertises the businesses that are out there, Skydive Orange and Homestead Building. And it has a digital signboard on it as well, which is approved by the FAA, whole 9 yards. It was actually put into operation the day of our last board meeting because somebody wanted to get some extra brownie points that day. So he made sure it was operating. It looked very good, and it will advertise the businesses that are back there as well as the county and meetings and registration for clubs and everything, but it sits right on Route 20. So it looks very good. As he mentioned, Wilderness Crossing is coming to an end as far as the planning commission goes. We've got to have it done April. And then it'll be coming to the board, and I don't look for it to be nearly as long a process with the board. But hopefully, don't know what will happen. Hopefully, we can get it passed and start getting some revenues in the next couple of years coming in to help offset other things in the county budget.
Got cash proffers on that.
We have some cash proffers, but we have other more important proffers such as, no, it's important things. Public safety, fire station, fire rescue station, schools. As any of you that know me, I'm very diplomatic. The school system can't decide what the hell they want. They have said elementary school forever and a day. And then out of nowhere, new superintendent, oh no, we're gonna need a high school down there. I'm sorry, they don't know what they want. They just keep throwing spaghetti at the wall, and when it's finally cooked, it'll stick. So it is moving forward. I would say that our planning commission will have vetted it 120%. And what I find interesting is it's good to have different thought processes, different opinions, but it needs to be kept in a civil manner. And I've seen some of that go out the window, which is very unfortunate. But so that's moving along, and I'll shut up at that point.
Now that wilderness, when it's built out, 3,000 units, or I can't remember how
No,
many. It's a lot.
As it comes through, basically around 3,800
Okay.
residential units, a town center, commercial, and then there's been some changes because of some potential growth in the area that we've seen in Culpeper County. Our economic zone, I guess is the best way to put it, has been increased in size back in there. So there is a potential for a lot of industrial. And then if that does not occur, it's set in over a time period where it would revert back to residential, and then it could be up to that higher number of residential. But it's 2,600 acres, and something that people either forget or want to forget is there's a little subdivision across the street from it, which happens to also be 2,600 acres. They have 4,218 building lots, which are pretty much all built out. And the extent of their commercial are a few little things right on Route 3. If there is opposition, it is from people in this community, and primarily from the ones that have recently moved to the county.
Close the door.
Yeah, so
That's how it usually is, yeah.
it's interesting and something that so many people have forgotten. This is now, I believe, approaching a 13-year project level that both the board, the planning commission, and the EDA all worked together and had Patrick involved in quite a bit of the planning, all sorts of people involved in it. But lo and behold, at this point now, including some of the ecological, yes, everybody was 100% behind it. But lo and behold, now that we're there, oh no, we're against it, and you got to do this, and you got to do that. And they were involved. They were absolutely involved in the early process and given every opportunity to not embrace it. But now that it's down to the last, and that's why I said, Fauquier County and the town of Warrenton were graced with Mr. Duvall's presence recently. And, if I need to pay to buy him a ticket to outer Saskatchewan during our process, I would be more than happy to do so. Thank you.
We
received the shoulder and arms application for tax credits, and we're processing that. I think just a couple of days ago. But it's not already processed. Right now, we're tied up, still doing our budgets, and we've got some major contract renewals that we're working on right now, particularly RSA. We have our projects are starting and things like the standpipe, which we won't have the tank delivered for another September at the earliest. We've started clearing the debris, and people are all concerned, you're taking the standpipe down. We've had some and disappointment with our lab that has done our sewer plant for years, changed hands and lost their certification. So we've had to go out to a new lab effective today, which the shop is, I mean, they changed hands and didn't do very well. Probably what they didn't do was do it on time. And that's what messed everybody up. On a couple good notes, beginning in May, we'll have music in the park. It's 4 months. Thursday nights, I believe, from remember Thursday nights, 4:30 or something. It's one of the Thursdays after there. It's on our website.
It's not the third Thursday. That's when Culpeper.
I
has
know,
it.
it was to avoid everybody else. That was. And I would say that there's this, like, where there are some new restaurants in town that come out. The shout is Main Street Tavern, Ellen J's Barbecue, and Orange Diner, and the Forked on Main is under new management. If you're not aware of that, I'll pass those on.
Didn't Cooper's expand as well when they moved? And old JoJo's.
I think they did. I think you did.
And their food is very good. by the way.
Okay. I like a couple of these. That's right. About it.
Thank you.
Falk here, I'm going to submit my budget to the board on Friday. It's my last budget. Before starting the budget, I was given direction by the board that we want to see a tax increase. I am proposing a 2% increase, but the increase will be in the fire and rescue levy to allow for upstaffing at least 3 of the state 9 stations to create that dual dispatch situation. We'll see what the board decides to do with that. Secondly, already mentioned, the town of Warrenton made a decision the other night to approve a data center in the town boundaries for Amazon, which will primarily serve a government installation by that should not be named, whoever they are up on the hill, but we all know who they are. That was an ugly process and confirms to me that unfortunately citizen decorum seems to be going south, which is really disappointing. But that's coming through. I'm sure there'll be a lawsuit, and so the building probably won't occur for at least another year or so on that. Our fire chief has announced his retirement after 31 years in the service. So we're going to be out looking for a new fire chief in the near future. And my deputy has asked me to indicate that she wants to begin looking at job order contracting, which is a collaborative solicitation process with individual awards. She was wondering if any localities in our PD have cooperative job order contracting at the moment. If not, if you're interested, please let us know. To the east of us, Prince William has it, Alexandria has it. They've worked together, so there's a benefit there. And so that's my major news from Walker County at the moment.
Well, as you might imagine, I'm on a massive learning curve as a new council member in Orange, so appreciate being able to be part of this. Anything that might help a newbie, let me know. One of the things that I guess a couple of issues. One, as I'm looking around at the different organizations, nonprofits of the town, and seeing the different places where we're trying to spur economic development. one question that I asked the council recently was, are we clear in our minds as to what actually creates economic development? And the room was too quiet in the face of that question. So I think there's some fuzzy things that we know that like, beautification, walkability, that kind of thing, low taxes for businesses. But if you all individually have anything that you think has been a lightning rod for creating positive economic development, I would definitely be interested in hearing your experience there. And on a completely maybe unrelated note, I told Patrick when we met that kind of a side passion of mine is dark sky initiative leanings, and he mentioned maybe it was Rappahannock has done some work there. So we have such a beautiful countryside here, but one of the most wonderful resources I think we have is the potential of a night sky, and the more these lights hit the air, the more we lose that. So I'd love to hear anything there that any of you have done. Thank you for letting me be part.
All right. Working on budget, we'll just go through that. Everybody's doing that. I wish I was submitting hours on Friday though, Paul. I'm envious. There'll be a few more weeks.
He just wants to get out of there.
He's earned it, right? He's earned it. Ongoing comp plan update. So Patrick, I just want to recognize Ms. Little's work. You all have been tremendous to allow that process to really flourish. And I think we're going to come away with a much different comp plan. Everybody talks about preserving agriculture. Sure, that's in Madison's bailiwick, but there's some other elements that's coming out through this comp plan. So definitely her skill set and experiences has helped shape that. So thank you. Please pass that along. Zoning, we're seeing a lot of uptick in short-term rental increases. Folks love that. Seems like it's more consistent income. They're dealing with renters and take care of your house. You have to replace. You can just rent out your house and pay your mortgage elsewhere. So we've seen an uptick in that. Radio project. We thought we had our northern tower site set, which was off a huge river bordering Rappahannock County. That project became very costly and overruns with a road that would need to traverse up a mountain, cross a small creek. I don't know if the Army Corps engineer thought it was the ocean, but it called for many sizable culvert pipes, and it caused us to change our location. Word got out. We were moving a little back towards the Etlin area. Community showed up, and they had other areas within the Etlin community they wished to see this tower. So we kind of told Motorola, hold on this site. We do have a balloon test scheduled for, I believe it's March 14th. I will pass that along here so you have the official date. Even though this new site is about 1.2 tenths, we're not going to play the mile game. We're going to give you notice of that. So that may be the final site on Churchill Road, but we'll let you know. We still have no indication if the park will ever want to be partners with us, but we're trying to nail that down. RSA update. Greene County is nearing their withdrawal. How many resolutions have we passed by now?
A ream's worth for each.
Yeah, it's getting a little crazy, but I don't know if we're 60, 90 days away. Somewhere
I'm
close.
hoping 60.
Somewhere close, I guess. But so that's going on. Orange and Madison will be, I guess you can say, the new RSA. Renovation of our former rescue squad building. I just received that draft PER today. That will be interesting. We're from 1.3 to 3.3 if you want to renovate, tear down some, renovate some old, or build new. So that will be fun. Smart scale projects. We had one approved last round that will go to construction advertisement in August. That is Route 29 South as you go towards Eaton at the Bavarian Chef, but near that intersection of Route 29 and Shelby Road. And then we made it out the scoring round for a roundabout on in Pratt's. That's Route 230 where the Blue Ridge Turnpike intersect. Waiting on CPP to vote on that. We hope that's favorable. So first roundabout in Madison, but I think it's going to do wonders considering the amount of call volumes our EMS receives from that intersection. So Oh, we have.
Jonathan, what did the volunteer EMS company do with their assets?
I was keeping this light and warm. I think I saw their extrication vehicle show up in West Virginia. They have donated some AEDs amongst a lot of our various churches, denominations. Not sure if we're getting 500,000 worth of a building that the county purchased. But I haven't seen a lot of other movement other than those AEDs. They told the county and the general public that the 500,000 purchase price from the county was going to go to set up scholarships for EMS, those who are pursuing a career in college studies or certificates. So waiting on that. I don't know if there'll be a check that shows up and says we had a second thought, we're going to give you money back, but that's the only civic contribution that I've seen that's come out of that.
Yeah.
I didn't want to steal Barber House, which is the project that they talked about. If you want to talk Skyline Cap, that's in the border. The renovation.
I don't actually know, that really hasn't been a part of ours much.
So Skyline Cap, the community action partnership that's in the town. Patrick, you want to like a 30-second?
Sure. So that was one of the projects under the PTC Housing Development Program was Barbara's House was a transitional shelter that was operated by Madison Emergency Services Association for many years. I think they stopped running that, I think even prior to COVID, had sort of stepped away from that role as part of their organization's mission. And so the building itself is directly behind Skyline Community Action Partnership's office on Main Street in Madison, and had been vacant. And so when this opportunity presented itself, Skyline made that request. And so what they've done is taken that, and we our funding assisted with the purchase price, but then we've also incentivized them with some additional funding to take what would have been 5 units and actually create a 6th unit. So they've got 2 3-bedroom units. The other thing that we encouraged them to do was previously when it was transitional shelter, there was a single washer and dryer for the whole facility. We had them, put those into each individual unit. So they really are units that are going to be upgrades from what the building was. And again, I think, as I've said to the board supervisor in Madison 2 weeks ago, really just a project that fits within the community and is not a large project that may have had faced opposition, but something that really works within the existing site. And again, I think was, for our region, the purpose of that program, the benefit of that funding. So good use of a vacant structure to support, some affordable and innovative housing concepts.
Thank you all for that. We'll get Simon to give us a tour, sure.
For the town of Madison, we don't have a lot going on, but we have a lot of stuff getting ready to start. We're getting ready to work on some beautification projects for Main Street. We are actually going to be meeting with Patrick next week. We secured a VDOT grant for, I want to say it was, we haven't got the actual figures from them. They sent a message through our attorney. So I don't have the actual number that they're going to give us, but we secured a grant for that, for them to start with trying to extend the sidewalks on the south end of town. We are going to start working with Patrick and them on trying to get some beautification projects and grants and things started to see what we can do about burying the overhead power lines and cable and phones and all that kind of stuff. That's one of our projects we're going to work on, and the other is to upgrade and add more sidewalks to get more money for those different areas of the town. They've been doing a few things. We've been working with VDOT a lot, so they've done a few things on Washington Street and Main Street, and they're getting ready to put in the new crosswalks everywhere, redo those. So lots going on with just trying to beautify it and get some of the old stuff out, update a lot of the signs that's in the town where they've been there for 40 years and fallen apart, or some people have 5 or 6 and really need one. So that's part of our project we're working on. We have tons of zoning going on in the town, the most since I've ever been there, as far as people want to rezone things to make it commercial or change the use of it for something else. Lots of businesses calling and trying to ask questions of things about coming into the county or into the town. And that's pretty much it, just the sidewalks, the signs, the beautification, working on the new grants to get some of these projects started where they've been probably like Ted and them's talked about for 8 years or lots longer or whatever. We're just trying to get some of those started and finally get them worked on and things with the money that we have. We need to use, we're gonna put a lot of our ARPA money that we have towards that project also.
We got a couple smart scale projects recommended for once. One is a traffic circle at 229 and 621 up near the Stonehaven development. And one is an intersection down past Stevensburg on Route 3. Our joint collaboration with the town as far as the pool is moving forward. We got the board to approve a conceptual plan for a pool with a bathhouse, concessions, a splash pad, a zero entry, and several lap lane area, and then a picnic pavilion. So excited about getting that bid as far as the engineering and design. But that should move forward and have a goal of opening in 2024. We have the board just adopted a utility scale solar ordinance and policy, which has been a years-long process, and hopefully that's behind us at least for a little while. And we have a comprehensive plan, which has also been a years-long effort, coming up March 7th, and barring any curveballs, I think that may get adopted, so my planning director can maybe sleep at night and then start working with Mr. Underwood, who's really leading the charge for us now. Our next thing to tackle is roads in the county. We've got some consulting help on that and looking at a lot of potential revenue sharing, probably more money than we've ever spent locally on road improvements. So that's where we're at.
Where's the pool gonna be?
Pool is at our sports complex right next to our field.
I know.
And yes, with the county, as John mentioned, we passed the solar ordinance. What it does is restrict it to 300 acres. We had an application of like 1,800 acres that withdrew. I can tell you as a member of the board, it has not quieted down since we did that. So I spent several hours on the phone over President's Day weekend discussing that and figuring out how that's going to go. But it appears that, well, based on recent history, we may be pro data center and we may be hesitant towards solar. So that seems to be the way that the board is shaking out, but we'll see. Always could change. Comprehensive plan, yes, lots of work sessions, but as far as I know, there's nothing contingent. So our contingents, so we're probably going to pass it and everybody's going to be happy. It's a not dramatic changes from our historic plan, although there is quite a bit of simplification. As John mentioned, the focus is, or a lot of the focus of constituents is transportation, particularly collector roads. So we've got a bunch of roads that are 18 feet wide, that have more than 2,000 vehicles a day on them, that have a bunch of curves. And so as elections come, like throughout, that's a major focus. And so finding ways to improve those has been a focus. With that, a couple of years ago, I remember that the legislature passed a tax increase, quite a big tax increase on gas. And it was bigger for all of us than it was for areas that have Commonwealth transportation authorities, because they already had a 7.6 per gallon gas tax, and we don't. But they passed one for us then. So I asked VDOT, great, where's our 7.6 cents? I was told that, well, if you don't have a transportation authority, it goes to smart scale. And I said, okay, well, Were we informed? Should we have created a transportation authority? They said, oh, well, Richmond was informed, so they created the Central Virginia Transportation Authority. So, yes, for us, if we could find a way to have greater control over that 7.6 cents, which in Culpeper alone for the county is probably $1.5 to $2 million a year, that would be helpful towards the transportation projects. So if we could look at it, I think we may find it mutually beneficial to do so. And there are blueprints as to how that's been done. Another thing that we are doing, as John mentioned, we are putting $5 million in the capital plan for road improvements each year. So that if we're doing it through revenue sharing means 10 million a year that we will be putting in roads, which seemed like a lot of money until you start talking about the cost of building a road, which means it doesn't really do anything. So outside of that, that's largely it right now.
Gordonsville's like any small town, you know, you're limited in what you can do. But that doesn't mean you have to limit yourself. It just means that you can't write a check when you want to. You have to find other ways to get the money. So in an operational standpoint, we're going along pretty well, but because of inflationary concerns, we don't have a corresponding inflation in our real estate tax values to create revenue to pay the salaries. We're already the lowest in a small town in the area. And so anybody that's working to maximize their income will not work for us. And if they work for us out of necessity, they'll leave as soon as they can. You try and counter that by giving them a lot of love and respect and time off to see their kids play soccer if they need it and make it a place they don't want to leave. And then there comes a limit on that. So we're really dealing with a salary analysis and being able to fund it, the little town of Gordonsville. Because when you do keep their key positions, you only need to keep. You can't turn over everybody. You can turn over some, but you can't be turning everybody over. So that's getting more challenging and more. It's always been challenging. I've done this for 23, 24 years, and it's always challenging, but it's more so now. So operationally, on the capital side as well, because how do you undertake a big capital project with 600 families? And a lot of those are single women on Social Security, you know, so how do they get together and put the capital forth? Even with a grant, you know, we can't come up with 20% of 2 or 3 million, you know, there's no 600,000. So we started discussions about boundary adjusting and using the regional commission for information gathering to make that decision. And little Gordonsville is actually one of the densest, highest per capita per mile place in the state. You know, you see like Arlington, Gordonsville, Norfolk, because we're so small, we're built out. So there are millions of square miles and we're 1 square mile. So we need to expand a little bit. We need more of a tax base and we're looking into that. So then the corresponding discussion on top of operating is capital. And we've had the issues there for years. I've brought them up initially, since I've talked to you, we've had a ribbon cutting for the airport. And it's a brand new runway, and I mean, not repaved, I mean, brand new. The old runway wasn't even foundationally acceptable. So it was all torn up and regraded. You know, it used to go like this. You didn't really see it that way, but if you did an engineer's side view, you would see that. When you were there, you didn't really see it. But still, the pilots couldn't see the other end of the runway from one end of the runway. So they kind of wanted to know what was coming because it's not a directed airport. There's no tower. So it was regraded, perfectly level, or as perfectly level as level can be in this aspect. And regraded for water and everything else, all of our taxiways and aprons, and regraded with, I think, probably 3 times the base and double the final asphalt. So we're ready for the future with our runway. We've had a ribbon cutting. Associated with that, we bought a couple of years ago a 27,000 square foot commercial industrial property that adjoins the airport and 12 acres. The biggest part of the 12 acres, coincidentally, not to us, but to someone else, was at the end of the runway, extended the end of the runway. The thing about getting any sort of support from any organization for runway extension is they decide that. They decide if you're worthy of an extension. If you do it yourself, then you're totally funding that yourself totally and further maintenance. We don't have a fat cat lined up for that. So we're limited to that. But for the length we've got a nice airport runway now. We've got the big 27,000 square foot property adjoining it. So we've got the beginning of a complex around the airport for future. We've still got one of the oldest buildings aviation wise in the country and our Langley hangar, because Langley was one of the first Air Force air bases in the country after the Wright brothers. And this was the hangar that they gave up when they modernized. In the 20s and 30s, it came to Gordonsville. So we've got an old Langley hangar. And so that's our airport. The commercial building for 27,000 square feet, everybody I run into, if I've talked this up everywhere, doesn't matter. They either don't hear it or aren't in the loop. They always say, how's your Taj Mahal of public works facilities? Because our public works facilities is in there. How come Gordonsville needs this humongous, beautiful, big building for public works? And I said, well, we don't. We only use a third of it. We rent the rest out. Oh, no, I know that y'all, they know everything, but they don't know anything about the project. So we did set up a public works facility of 9,000 square feet there. We rent out the rest of it. We get $112,000 in rent a year from our others, which is more than our debt service on the entire project, the land, the commercial building that's not public works, the public works. So we're self-funding the entire purchase. The airport itself, the grant we got, you cannot have a matching grant. You can't use a federal grant or a flow-through federal grant as your local match for that. So it was an extreme kind of, I'm in a weekly poker game, kind of a poker game when they said, do you have full support for this project if we go forward with it and grant? I said, absolutely, 100% time. How am I going to come up with $400,000 or $500,000? But if I even paused, I could see that they were going to, because they're a little concerned, are we throwing money into this? Well, in that moment, that wasn't a prayer for COVID. It really wasn't. I wouldn't put that on the country. But when COVID came and some of the money came, some prayer was answered by somebody. But there was money that came that I didn't know was coming, but I thought it would come. Now it's a federal grant, can't be used, right? Talked to McGuire Woods and all the big law firms in the state, the ML, that said you can use it for first responders, et cetera. So there were a list of things you could use it for. And by edict of the town council, we used AirShare for that. Amazingly enough, that freed up a lot of money in our budget to match the airport grant. It's so silly to me. I told them it's silly, it's ridiculous. The grant funded it, but they said it won't be considered that. You use that for your first responders and you use that money for all the silly games you play. But so 100% funding for the airport. Our rent is 100% funding the ability and the extra land. Since we have no money, fortunately, we paid no money. Our pool and park, which we're hoping to start construction for this year and use next year. We had an estimate of $3.5 million. We raised that last year, 100%. Town didn't put any money in. We got a grant matching a 50% grant. So we raised $1.8 million by contributions and then got a grant raised. And then when we took it to the planners and they got to the detailed plan, they said, oh, it'll be 6.4 million. Thank you very much. So we started cutting everything down. We're in the upper fives, but still we need another couple million. We're at 2.5. So we'll phase it. We'll do the first phase and start the pool construction this year. But right now we've got a dinky little, 70-year-old park that's falling apart. Equipment right beside this new wonderful swim pool. So we do want to continue on the pool, but we're in the process now of starting a broad-based fundraising that if people can't give what they've already given, that they'll give more. And we'll go back to our major contributor who has a little bit of cash of his own, but he doesn't want to be the sugar daddy. He wants to be part of the solution. See if he can give a little more. Then we'll go back to the grant folks and see if they'll do that. So we got to come up with $2 million more there. But again, although I've put in $10 billion worth of my time, Gordonsville is putting up this much because this is how much we have to give. And actually, it's a little more than that because when this process started, we bought some properties and took them down and old houses that were like 20,000 here in Kent. So teeny bits, but as far as the construction, zero. So I only say all that because when I was listening to Madison talk about what they can do, and I'm thinking about the small towns of this region, you can either try not to do anything, or you can have a big imagination. And because small towns just can't do big jobs, but you can't not try to do the big things. You just can't, because the people in the town need it. Enough said. And before I pass, I have to say that I want to thank Megan for her 2 years, Chairman Taylor, Chair Taylor, I guess, you put in there, but for her close attention to detail and her enthusiastic services, our chair. She's also the perfect person. You know, I always try and make a real effort to bond us a little bit. I encourage all of you, if you're putting a promotion out for music or a special event or a ribbon cutting, to put me on the email, because not as a politician, not even as a representative of this commission. I grew up in Central Virginia. I'm interested in Culpeper and Madison and Orange. I'm not just interested in Gordonsville. I'm in Charlottesville, I'm in Fredericksburg, I'm in Culpeper, I'm in Warrenton. I've been there a couple of times the last few months. So I like to know. And I don't know if everybody's that way. And I'm not saying send an email out to all of us. Y'all might not want the extra emails. I'm putting my name forward there if anybody wants to add me to your email list for promotions. But you've been very great in bringing us together and bonding and you know, the whole camaraderie that this regional commission needs to do, rather than just come here and vote and go home. There needs to be camaraderie, and you've been great at that. And I just want to thank you for your efforts.
Well, that's kind of, okay. I was, to follow on what Mr. Pointer said, I was going to say that I appreciate having been in the middle chair for the past couple of years. This is a great group of people. And I especially enjoyed, oddly enough, during COVID, when we did, it was, you know, certainly a challenge, and Patrick and the staff did such a great job of letting us do this via Zoom, and then having the remote participation by people who couldn't be here. And then what was really fun was going to each locality at different times, and that gave us an opportunity to, you know, to see places in Warrenton and Washington and everywhere. And I thought that was kind of a nice thing that we did. And it was a good way to get to know everybody's towns and get to know everybody. So so I appreciated doing that. I will say for Culpeper as well, we've started our activities, and so I will put you on the email for some of those things. Our concert season is coming up. We had our Carnival, the Mardi Gras celebration over the weekend, and of course we'll be having our spring Gnarly Hops and Barley Festival coming up. So that'll be in April. We also promoted a new police chief in town. So in addition to all the projects that Mr. Hadley spoke of, we also have a new police chief, and someone from within who's been with the department, what, 25 years? Yeah, he's been there. So pretty excited that Mr. Settle is our new chief. Anyway, I'd like to also thank Patrick and the staff as well. Like I said, the glue that holds us all together and keeps these meetings running smoothly and certainly keeps me prepared. I think it goes without saying, you all know we have a terrific director here who deserves an awful lot of credit for the success of this commission. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. That's it for me.
Before we adjourn, I do have one thing. I sit on the board of directors of VACO, and we'll be having a meeting in April. Something I am going to bring up then, but I'd like the local jurisdictions to start thinking about it. There is a severe shortage of fire and rescue personnel to hire. The volunteer issue is all in itself. But what ends up happening, and it has become literally a crisis. How many people have you put on in the last 2 years, Paul?
Oh, golly, in the last 2 years, 40.
Right. So all the jurisdictions, you've just gone to a paid EMS service. What is happening is literally even worse than compensation and pay studies. everyone is stealing from everyone for fire and rescue personnel. And I don't mean just sitting there, they're stealing. And Spotsylvania County had a safer grant for 50. They had to turn it back in even after they got an extension. They couldn't get the people. So what I'm going to be proposing at VACO, since the vast majority of jurisdictions in the Commonwealth are under the VRS system, is to get fire programs or whoever the appropriate body is to look at establishing a fire and rescue certification / pool for employees. Because there are parts of the state, and I'll just go with Southwest for the first part, where people are really looking for jobs, but they don't have the certifications, and a lot of jurisdictions do not yet have recruit schools. But if they can get certified locally by the state agencies, that would create a pool for the different regions to pull from and increase the number of prospective individuals. And the biggest thing is VRS is a portable retirement system, as long as you're going somewhere else in the state, under a government agency. There's a few exceptions, Fairfax County, Washington Metropolitan Airport Authority, a couple of places like that. But otherwise, the entire Commonwealth is under the same retirement pool. I've been giving a lot of thought to this, trying to figure out what we can do, because every time I talk to our chief, people are leaving to go elsewhere. So think about that. Think if there's things that may be applicable, or whether you would support it or not support it. I am bringing this up at the Board of Directors meeting in April. I think it is one of the most viable ways that we can staff at a reasonable level throughout the jurisdictions. And then on just a little side note, most of our first responders are extremely overworked. I know our overtime budget in fire and rescue is crazy. Yours has got to be out of sight. That leads to a lot of health and wellness concerns. We just recently hired a health and wellness person. Have a close friend that just committed suicide. Been a first responder since 2000. I'm not saying that this is what caused it, but it absolutely adds to everything. So we need to take care of our first responders to work locally or get other people to come in and support them so they can support the citizens and reduce some of this risk. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And let us know the outcome of when you said
I
we'll present
absolutely
that.
will. And as you all know, I'm very bashful, so it'll be a discussion.
Okay. Anyone have anything else? Okay, congratulations once again to the new officers and welcome to the new folks, and we'll see you next time.
I've got another meeting. I almost got 10 minutes ago, but I said I can't go early, but I've got to get out of here. I'm gonna be